Okay, folks, are y'all about to wrap up your email and Facebook checking and all that kind of stuff? We'll get started in about 3 minutes, okay? Just so that we're on time and if we can get you out of here sooner, that might be a good thing too. I would like to encourage you to come on down front. It looks like it's going to be a small crowd, and we really would like to have a conversation with you. It would be a whole lot easier if we're a little bit closer. If you want to just sit at a table all by yourself, you're going to have to stand up and dance on it. That's what we're going to make you do. So, at least come down and sit with the yeah, they'll do it back there. So y'all come on down, and let's see if we can have a good conversation together, okay? Thanks. Besides, if you come down, we've got some handouts down here that you may or may not want. They're here in case you do. So. Thanks, I appreciate that. Thanks a whole lot. Yes. This is a session on engaging employers and creating strong partnerships with employers. I hope that's what you came for. I'm Peg Walton. I'm the Senior Director of Workforce Readiness for Corporate Voices Working Families. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a moment. And I'm going to have my colleagues introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Carl. I'm a utility worker for PG&E, just started a few months ago. And I'm a shop.
Okay, you're going to have to get closer to talk. Do it one more time. Okay.
Okay, my name is Carl. I'm working for PG&E. I just started a few months ago. I just finished one PG&E program, pathway program. In the second one also. And now working for PG&E.
I also love working for PG&E. I'm the Senior Manager of Workforce Development at Pacific Gas and Electric Company, which includes leading public and private partnerships in developing training programs, and Colin is one of the graduates of our programs.
Okay, so hopefully you're here because you're interested in engaging employers. I'd like to ask just very quickly, who's in the room that directly works with employers in some way right now? Anybody? Okay. Can you give me just a heads up? Are you an administrator? Are you a classroom teacher? President? Okay. Presidents are good to have in the room when you want to talk to employers. Okay. Who else? Anybody else? Yeah, back here, you work with employers as well?
I do, as a dean.
As a dean. Okay, good. Well, and that's a lot of places that those connections happen. We're going to talk about the characteristics of strong partnerships, which are some of the practical things that my colleagues here at ATD were telling me you guys wanted to hear about. I will start out with a kind of a high-level national version of what some of the issues are, and then we'll get into the actual practice that PG&E has with some of their community college partners. First, just a short thing on Corporate Voices. We are a DC-based business membership organization. We work primarily with Fortune 500 companies. We do a lot of policy advocacy work around issues of education, social issues, and workforce policy. We represent about 55 companies. They represent over 4 million employees in all 50 states as well as globally. Our work strives to promote an understanding that when families prosper, communities prosper, businesses prosper, everybody wins. And a lot of our work is basically trying to bring about models that support that. Kind of a niche organization. We do a lot of research, deep collaboration with employers. We look at business best practices, and again, do advocacy. Our workforce readiness work, however, means working with partners on a broad range of their talent development issues. We've done a lot of research around the entry-level worker and what do employers look for and what are they getting. Some of our historical research was, are they really ready to work? That got is cited still today, and that was done 6-7 years ago. And then we did the ill-prepared workforce. And one of the things that we were looking at there are what are employers doing to try to correct that, and in fact found that it was a hodgepodge and we really didn't have an understanding of what they were accomplishing. There were no metrics attached to it in most situations. A lot of them still aren't. And then we did from an ill-prepared to well-prepared workforce, which was starting to look at the partnerships between higher education providers. And I'm going to get into a couple of our new pieces that have been very attached to community colleges particularly. So that's who we are. I'm going to start with and I know everybody probably gets tired of hearing the skills gap issue, you already know it. I just wanted to visualize it for you because we asked our employers what keeps you up at night, and probably their second most important thing is they talk about where are we going to have our future workforce, where is it going to come from. Are y'all familiar with Tony Carnevale's work out of Georgetown that did the Help Wanted? And, you know, so we all cite that, we all talk about it. These are Tony's numbers, and that first of all, the education level of Americans is declining as we retire the most educated cohort in the United States. And the group that's coming, the workforce is coming behind. We've got to find ways to help them prepare for today's workplace. So right now, we know that 93% of mid-level professional jobs require an associate degree. 93% of them do. And yet only 38% of the public actually has attained at least that. And so the red is the skills gap that keeps our employers up at night. Another piece out of Tony's research, again, out of Help Wanted, that I don't think gets cited nearly as much, is the recognition that employers spend a whole lot of money on skills training, education. As a matter of fact, of the $772 billion that's spent annually on post-secondary education in the United States, 501.8 billion, that's $500 billion, is spent outside of formal education by businesses. So if you recognize this kind of investment, you know that it matters to them, that it's a high priority for them, and it opens to you an opportunity for gaining a partner to which you can bring value and they can bring value to you as well. Just some recent research, I think we've heard a lot in the press about, well, employers aren't training anymore, but we had about 3 years of decline in the training budgets. But as of 2012, we saw a 9.5% increase in what employers are spending on training and education. So the kind of investment that's being made is an opportunity to leverage each other's work and really create something that serves both our students and our communities. Most recent piece of research that came out, are you familiar with the McKinsey report, Education to Employment? Anybody seen that? Okay, it's a really important piece. It's not just about domestic education, it's a global look because so many of our companies are global companies. But one of the things, again, and it's not to hammer it home, but it's to help us understand that divide, is the question was asked, and it was asked of educators as well as employers, are graduates adequately prepared for the workplace? And one of the educators' response to that is telling. 72% think yes, we're preparing people for the workforce. And I'm not saying this to offend anybody, I just want y'all to see the comparison. The same question asked of employers was, their response was 42% said yes. So what we've got there, that 30% gap, is an opportunity. And it really is, the only way we're going to bridge it is to be able to work together. Interestingly enough, when you ask the students the same question, are you prepared for the workforce? Students, only 45% felt like they were as well. So that's not to beat anyone over the head, it's just to state this is the way it is, and this is what we have to deal with, and so let's work together to get that done. We found similar kind of numbers with our Across the Great Divide. That was done a couple of years ago. We don't seem to be moving that a whole lot. One of the other things that came out of the McKinsey report is the fact that two-thirds of employers in the United States have no interaction with higher ed in any way. And that's our fault. I say ours being the employment community, the employer community, and its educations, because we've got to figure out how to work together more closely. That's a big piece of our work at Corporate Voices. We've created a body of work called Learn and Earn. We do know, particularly in community colleges, we know this, something like 70% of the students are working at least part-time, and 30% of them are working full-time. And the fact that they're trying to negotiate between two, bureaucracies, education and work, it really creates the constraints for them. So our work is this encouragement that we work together to create pathways, and for me it's a bridge where these people who are particularly underskilled and lower income people have an opportunity to walk across and become the talent pool that we need, but also it creates completions for you and helps you serve your folks as well. So that closer alignment is critical. Some of the companies that we've done deep research with, these are several companies that, not just Corporate Voices members, but other other folks in the business community. And we've written case studies. They're called Learn and Earn micro business cases. They're short one-pagers. They're open to the public for you to use. But what it's doing is it's telling the return on investment from the employer's point of view of why you should be doing these kinds of partnerships with higher ed. And I bring this to you because as the community college and the education community, if you understand what their drivers are, what their needs are, and the reasons that they're doing what they're doing, then in fact it makes you more valuable as you walk in the door. So it's kind of trying to help you, gain some insight as to how to work with your employers. So from these case studies, what we've created is first of all, what you can expect from your employers, and the kinds of practices that support lifelong learning. Probably for the employer community, your best practice employers, one of the things that they will commit to very often is tuition assistance. Some of your high road employers, and frankly not all of them do or have to do this, but tuition assistance is kind of a table stakes. If they're going to differentiate themselves from other employers. So a lot of them will be doing that, and a lot of times your students don't take advantage of that or don't even realize that. So other practices that we've identified that help support and connect these learner and partnerships that particularly apply to you, and I'm not sure if you can see this up here, but FYI, I have an executive summary of this report down here, as well as a full, all ones with the full case studies, and they're available on our website, so you can go and find it there. But I think in the community college setting particularly, some of the partnership pieces that work are cooperative education partnerships, and we were just discussing that before we got started here. The opportunity to have input on what is being shared in the classroom, as well as engaging students then to see if in fact they fit culturally within an organization, to see if, it's almost a way of vetting talent as well. So understanding what you offer to your business partner would be one thing. They'll also offer internships, mentorships. They'll help with career navigation within the sectors that you're looking at. And I think that you really have to engage them to support your industry-recognized credentials. If you're trying to bring together a cohort around an industry, having multiple employers vet that for you and support you in that is really critical. Again, I'm giving kind of a high level on this, and what I'd really like to do is drill down if we're touching on some things that are of interest to you. So don't want to just stand up here and talk to you. I'm happy to entertain questions at any time if anything sparks, okay? So that's the what of what they will do, and knowing what you can go to them and ask them for as a partnership is going to be important to know as you go out there. The other thing is the why. There are multiple business drivers for corporations that want to engage in what we call learn and earn partnerships or partnerships with higher ed. And I think that if you're going to be successful when you go out and talk to them, if you understand their drivers, if you understand what's bringing them to the table, what keeps them up at night, then in fact you're better positioned to talk to them from a business standpoint. So we always know that the big boat that's underneath this is creating a skilled talent pool. And that's what they're looking at. That's the thing that keeps them up at night. But very often there are sub-drivers that it's always good to be aware of. And a few that I've pulled out, again, they're listed here, and that's very hard to read, but you can, this same information and graphic is in the executive summary. The ones that I think are important to you as a community college is very often they'll come to their community colleges because they want to build a diverse professional workforce. They want their workforce to mirror the community in which they're serving, and therefore the community college offers that opportunity. They want to shorten the time to productivity. So anytime they can bring in an employee who is skilled to a level that they don't have to reach back and bring along, and those are some of the case studies that we look at the level of productivity and how quickly that happens. They want to decrease their hiring and training costs, frankly, and if we can share those costs together, then that creates a win for everybody. And then finally, they really are looking for increased connections within their communities and they see the community college as a place to do that. And I think that, again, president to president level, that happens a good bit. I just came from Cerritos College, where this morning we are vetting a industry sector around the retail management credential. And one of the reasons that one of the colleges said, the reason I'm here is because my president got a call from the president of a large retail grocery store who said, we really want to do this here. And it started there, and then together they applied for one of the tax grants and received it and we're off and running. So a lot of times that happens there. When I've talked to other community colleges, it happens at the dean level, it happens by program or something like that, and sometimes I hear back from community colleges very often is, we don't get to talk to employers, that only happens someplace. So sometimes just working through that at the community college level and knowing who gets to talk to whom about what is an important step in creating those practices. One of the things that we've created out of our studies is a blueprint. It's how to build a partnership. I'm going to go through just a couple of things, but I think Yanni's going to talk about it in more detail as far as how the application of some of these things. But this is one more tool that's available to you. It's a pretty high level. When I say high level, I mean it's somewhat. Each one of the bullet points has to be interpreted and actually worked through. But there's a pathway there. It's kind of a blueprint, and it's being used a good bit by a lot of our community college partners. And it's out there. It's been vetted both by community colleges and by employers. And I just wanted to share with you one comment. And this, I have to read this. I just got this. I ran into Rod Nunn. Anybody know Rod from Workforce? He leads one of the TAC grants and comes out of the community college system in St. Louis. And I worked with them in their orientation on their TAC grant when they were trying to bring together their employers and the community colleges in the workforce group. And they used this as an instrument in that, and now they've gotten a second round, round 2 funding. And I ran into him at WDI, the Workforce Development Institute, just this week down in San Diego. And Rod came up after and said, we've used the blueprint in our TAC grant orientations because it provides the best construct we've seen to help guide our thinking on how we can enhance our relationships with business partners in round 1 and 2, either doing healthcare or manufacturing. So it's a tool. If it helps you, again, I've got some copies of it up here if anybody wants to grab one, but it's also on our website, and for anybody to freely download and work with. So we encourage you to pick that up if it's helpful to you. And then some of the top level things that you're going to find in there, I'm just going to go through them very quickly, is practical steps in creating these partnerships. You've absolutely got to start out with common objectives. So coming together and recognizing what is it that we share in common that we can work through. The second thing is determining leadership. Who are your champions on each side of the relationship? Who are your business champion and then who's your community college champion? And having them work together both up and down and bring leadership to it. Creating a trusting and respectful relationship is critical. Again, and these are high-level bullets. You start looking through, the practical side. What does that mean? Creating trust has a whole lot to do with delivering what you say you're going to, showing up, being part of the conversation, and building relationships. Recognizing that flexibility just needs to be a piece of that, and as it is in any relationship. I hear this all the time. I assume that you do too. That we speak a different language. Try to be clear. Business and education speak a different language. I tell you what, I've worked in both, and I've heard that for too long, and I think it's time for us to just get over it and quit saying it. There are cultural differences, but that doesn't mean that culture can't be overcome. So I think going into a relationship and recognizing that we come to it with very different cultures can be overcome if we work through that. So let's quit saying that and let's just work through it. So, it's important. This seems pretty simplistic, but as you start developing this relationship, to schedule activities and stick with the schedule and follow it. Everybody has then kind of a pathway, and that sounds kind of silly, but it has to be said. There are going to be environmental factors that are going to affect your relationship and your project. So that goes back up to that flexibility, but being cognizant of environmental changes, the economy changes, we go into things, and sometimes we can't necessarily deliver what we think we can on both sides, but recognizing that we have to be continually scanning the environment for what's changing so that we can be flexible. Businesses have to do that all the time. Clearly defining everybody's roles and expectations as you go into it. Again, if you go back to what you can expect from a business partner, and you can look at what does a business bring to this partnership, and then start defining, well, who can do what, and how do we create that is where the relationship's forged. Do I have to say this here? ATD is founded in this, but businesses, of course, are. Metrics matter. The whole what gets measured gets counted. But recognizing that you've got some shared measurement and data that you're going to be sharing with each other. And then finally, I've got a different slide for this, but I didn't pull it out. Communication is critical, and between every one of these bullets should be communication. So even having a codified way of communicating around a project that you're doing together is really critical. So those are real high level, and again, you've got tools that will share some of that with you if you want to look at those. I'm happy to answer questions at this point in time, but what I'd also we'll transition to right now is letting Yanni then give you a specific case around PG&E and their partnership. Any questions before? Okay.
All right, thanks, Peg. So I know it's late in the day, so I brought some nice little incentives. Ooh.
Fix that.
Okay, I brought some nice little incentives to keep you guys motivated to presentation. So there will be questions asked. A nice little PG&E Power Pathway branded shopping bag, and a nice little travel coffee mug, PG&E Power Pathway branded. So I'll put them right here. So if they fall asleep, yeah, I could toss it. This one's, this one's safe. I can do that. Hey, do you want to? All right. So PG&E. How many of you are from California? Okay, a couple. Okay, so I can actually tell this joke and hopefully you get what I mean. So I'm from San Francisco. PG&E is based in San Francisco. I was actually very sad to come down here and it was not sunny. Because everybody who comes to San Francisco is disappointed when it's not sunny. And I come down here and I want it to be sunny and it wasn't. So anyway, hopefully the folks that are from out of town aren't too disappointed that it's not nice and sunny down here. So PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, we're a relatively large natural gas and electric utility. We serve 70,000 square miles, about 5% of the U.S. population. So that's our business. And what is Power Pathway and how did Power Pathway actually come about? So we have a problem. 40% of PG&E's workforce, that's almost 10,000 people, are either currently eligible or will be eligible for retirement in the next 5 years. That's a lot of people. And do we have enough folks that are skilled and trained to come into our workforce? Well, Peg showed the numbers earlier. No, we don't. So we took it upon ourselves as an industry employer to actually work with educators as well as other stakeholders in our community to actually do something about that. And that's how Power Pathway was developed. It's a solution bringing together different partners such as community colleges, universities, workforce investment boards, other industry-related employers, as well as military installations to actually come together to create training programs to address that skills gap. So I will actually read verbatim a quote from our president. It takes many years of training to operate and maintain our gas and electric facilities. Power Pathway allows us to partner with schools and communities to ensure we have a qualified pool of candidates for our workforce. That's our president. Another quote from one of our superintendents that you can read up there. The other one I wanted to read verbatim is a quote from one of our supervisors. The people we've hired on who've come through Power Pathway are truly remarkable for the way they tackle their jobs. They're highly motivated self-starters, and they have a do it and do it right work ethic. I'm pleased and proud to have them here for the decommissioning project at Humboldt Bay. And so now we will actually see a video that gives you a little bit more about Power Pathway.
I'm an apprentice smoker. I heard about Power Pathway program through PG&E.
PG&E started a workforce development program back in 2008 called Power Pathway that really focuses on delivering tomorrow's workforce today.
Up and over, that's it. Up and over, up and over. Okay? Installing crossarm, installing crossarm.
Our main focus is to actually create programs with public and private collaborations through community colleges, community-based training organizations, or even universities to actually get trained, qualified, and diverse workers to come to the workforce. PG&E is looking at about 40% of retirement eligible in the next 5 years. We're definitely looking for folks to move into the entry-level workforce because they are our future. The big goal for that particular group is to look at the youth of our communities.
It gave me the skills I needed to really understand what PG&E expects from their employees. They also taught us how to work on gas lines, to repair broken services, broken mains, and actually work through troubleshooting and how to fix the problem.
Other people that come into the company fresh off the street, it seemed like it's an uphill battle. I'm really proud of Ezekiel and the work he's done. He's been very successful. He's very self-driven. An operator has to be able to work in an environment where there's a lot of activity, a lot of noise, a lot of information coming at them. They need to be able to focus on the task at hand.
Because there's really no second chance when you're working with this kind of equipment. And so a lot of lives depend on you making the right decisions. I have a bone splice here. We got a clearer now, and we currently got a clearer put it on.
You get folks who understand what it's like to have grown up in tough situations, and they're actually very, very grateful. They're very teachable, and that's something that's very important for our supervisors in terms of identifying folks to join their groups.
After high school, I joined the Marines. I was in for 4 years. When I first got out of the military, I was out of work for a year and a half and really struggling. And now that I'm here at PG&E, it's definitely a career, and I really do see me here for till I retire.
We cannot fill the skills gap alone. Education typically doesn't connect with the industry in terms of what's needed, the skill set or curriculum standpoint. And so we've hit the jackpot in terms of identifying community colleges, community-based training organizations that we can partner with to actually provide that training to the pool of candidates that we're looking for.
With PG&E, we work with them to screen candidates. We perform a work keys assessment, and we also prepare candidates to pass PG&E's pre-employment test and to interview for positions within PG&E. We develop and offer training. We offer cable splicing. We do safety. We also do pole climbing, and that reduces cost for them because they have the best, the most qualified candidates to fill those positions.
Power Pathway is definitely about building a talent pipeline, and it's a win-win, both for the community and for PG&E, because we are getting more qualified, more diverse, more skilled workers coming into the workforce. And actually for folks to go through our program, they are more educated about what PG&E does, they're our customers, and they actually become our greatest ambassadors going back out in the community.
I am very happy. I cannot think of anywhere else I'd rather be. I take pride in what I do and where I'm at.
Okay, all right. So there's another overview of Power Pathway. So in terms of how we go about doing this, I'll talk a bit more about that. So Power Pathway actually works with about 12 to 15 different colleges within our service territory in Northern and Central California. I'm going to just kind of walk down here. This table is bothering me a little bit. I feel like I'm going to get a little closer to you, and that I can also toss this if I need to. So there's on the slides there, you can see the types of colleges that we work with, in addition to community-based training organizations. We just launched a women's-only program, mainly because non-traditional jobs and utilities, we don't have women. And so we launched a program through an organization called Tradeswomen, Inc. to actually work with us to bring more women into the trades. So there are two types of Power Pathway programs. One type is an affinity program, which is one where we work with the college to develop curriculum that we're specifically looking for in the electric utility as well as natural gas industry. So we have welding capstones and an electrical power system certificate that Colin actually will talk a little bit more about. He's actually currently enrolled in that program. So I'm not a technical person, so I'm not going to try to go through the details of what's on that slide. But to show you, this is the type of curriculum that we've worked with the colleges to develop. Through our own internal learning organization that trains about 500 apprentices a year, we actually bring that curriculum to the college. We also bring instructors to our internal learning organization to learn those skills and bring that back to the classroom. The programs that I will focus more on today are our signature programs, what we typically call our bridge programs. And these programs, we actually work closely with our workforce investment partners to actually do this screening, and you saw that earlier. Jason Cameron from San Jose Workforce Institute is a key partner in that. To actually do a rigorous screen for any one program, we'll get 1,000 candidates. So we work closely with our workforce investment boards to screen, and then have our community colleges actually teach the programs. And so coming out of it, a cohort of 20 or 30 candidates, we actually get very high quality candidates coming out of the training programs. So an example of that, Colin will also talk a bit more about it. He was a graduate of the program, our Bridge to Utility Worker program. These programs provide folks a breadth of what it means to work in the utility industry, safety, tools. They also receive test preparation. For any entry-level skilled craft position at PG&E, you have to pass the PTB test, which is the physical test battery. It's math, it's spatial reasoning, it's reading comprehension. And so through these programs and community colleges, we actually provide that support and training. And in addition to that, there's also employability skills training, how to interview, resume tips, things like that. So numbers. Power Pathway in the last 5 years has graduated over 340 students. And this year alone, we're planning to run 12 programs and graduate over 250 students. And they're placed all across PG&E service territory. So I talked a bit about this already in terms of what it takes. So for any one program, we'll get 1,000 or so candidates. The Workforce Investment Board does the marketing outreach as well as screening for us. They sign up directly on PG&E's website. There's a slide on the website just a little later. And from there, the 1,000 or so candidates will actually do a screen, phone screen, resume screen, bring in person, 200 people to go through an in-person orientation. That's still a lot of people because we need to sort of wind that down to about 20 to 30 for one cohort. How do we do that? Well, we bring them in, sort of tell them, you know what, it's a tough job to actually work in a skilled trade. Sometimes you're working 12 hours a day, working, 24-hour shifts if you need to. And so, people sort of beat out on their own, but we still have about 150 or so who want to go through the program. So from there, we do a drug screen, background check. We also leverage work keys, for those of you who might be familiar with that, to actually screen for folks who can actually have an aptitude to pass our pre-employment tests. And from there, we'll go down to about 50 or so candidates, and they have an in-person interview to actually get into the program. So if you think about it, it's actually a very, very rigorous process to actually get into a Power Pathway program. And so from there, it's anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks. You saw the curriculum earlier. So in addition to just the curriculum, we actually bring the students on site onto PG&E facilities to get a better sense of what they're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. We bring in guest speakers, we bring in folks from the industry to talk about what careers are available at PG&E. And so from there, we also provide channels for them to interact directly with hiring managers and supervisors. That's the key. Without those people in the room who recognize the credential and for them to actually pay attention to these students, it's going to be hard for them to get jobs. So Power Pathway provides that avenue as well. And so from there, they graduate with the Power Pathway certificate. They're case managed by the Workforce Investment Board. So again, Workforce Investment Board, community college, and industry work very closely together to actually make the program successful. And after that, we get about 71% of Power Pathway graduates are placed into industry. So that's not the actual hiring rate, that's just placement in industry. And that's a pretty good number. Our goal is to get that up to 80% this year. So you'll see about 58% actually come into PG&E as a full-time employee, 13% into the industry for a total of 71%. We also have other sort of focus areas. 25% of our graduates are actually youth. between the years of 18 to 26, so we do have a focus on youth. In addition to that, we also focus on veterans. So 50% of our graduates are veterans, and Ezekiel Robles from the video was a veteran. And also, 60% of our graduates are ethnically diverse. So that's another area of focus for Power Pathway as well. And so for those of you who didn't catch all of those numbers, there you go, 71% placement rate into the industry, 25% youth, 50% veterans, and 60% diversity. So what happens after they get placed into PG&E? This is specific to PG&E, and we're able to track their progression. So what you see on your left is when they first join PG&E, where they come in. Utility worker is the very most entry-level position that you can come into PG&E. That's what COM currently is, and he'll talk a bit more about that from personal experience. So 70% of folks who come through Power Pathway land the utility worker job. But a year later, we have stats that show 70% of those folks actually move into higher level jobs. And you can see there on your right the types of jobs those graduates are now in. So you'll see that they don't stay in their current jobs. So in the Bay Area, a utility worker starts making $24 an hour. Pretty good job for someone who doesn't have a college degree. Or pretty good salary for someone who doesn't have a college degree. And so for any of these apprentice and journey level positions, you're talking about $40, $50 an hour plus overtime. So there's some pretty good incentive there for coming into PG&E. One of our partners, Center for Energy Workforce Development, CEWD, they're a national consortium for utilities, and they have a very good website that shows different career pathways for folks that are interested in going into the utility industry. So would encourage you, if you have utility industrial driven programs at your schools, probably want to check that out. So what does PG&E Power Pathway want to do going forward in 2013, now that we have a relatively successful program, placement rate, and so forth? Well, we've heard from the supervisors that they want more specialized training programs. What I like to call T-shaped programs. It provides breadth and it provides depth, so that when we have folks come through the utility industry, they understand what it means, but then there's also sort of the depth piece of moving into specific career pathways within the utility industry. Second is to create a Power Pathway alumni network. Just like all of your schools, you guys have alumni networks. It's a great way to continue to promote the program as well as its success. So by the end of this year, we will have over 500 graduates, and that's over 1% of PG&E's workforce. So it's definitely something we want to leverage. The third piece is something that potentially your schools might be interested in, is actually getting college credits for our apprenticeship programs. PG&E has over 35 apprenticeship programs. And so we're working through ACE to try to get college credits for these apprenticeship programs so that folks who have gone through the apprenticeship can actually go to college and actually have credits already. So they actually have more of an incentive to go back to school. The fourth piece, and Con will touch on this, PG&E offers tuition reimbursement. So for bargaining unit employees, $5,250, I believe, per year to go back to school. For management employees, it's $8,000. So how do we continue to push that lifelong learning culture with folks that go through Power Pathway? Is to continue to leverage the continuing education. Fifth is that PG&E is the chair of an organization of currently 15-member utilities in California to address the workforce issue. Strength in numbers, that's what we're trying to do, is to bring together a group of utilities to work with education around addressing the skills gap. And finally, something that we hear all the time, why do people want to come and work for a utility? Well, I've been there for almost 10 years, and I love working at PG&E, and I'm sure Tom feels the same way. How do you make it cool to work in a utility. Nobody thinks about working at PG&E. So one of the focus areas that we have in 2013 is rebranding what it means to work in a utility. So that said, more information can be found at www.pge.com/powerpathway. And before I turn it over to Kong, I am now going to ask my questions to see if you've been paying attention. So get ready, raise your hands. What percentage of youth have we hired through Power Pathway?
25%.
All right, we have a winner. Which one would you like?
The coffee.
The coffee mug. All right. Okay. This one I can't. Okay, my next question. Let's see if anyone caught this. This wasn't on the slide. What is our goal for placement for Power Pathway into the industry? All right. We have our second winner. So it sounds like we have some folks paying attention.
Are you taking questions now?
Sure, we can take some questions.
So one of the biggest criticisms in Washington State of similar arrangement is that taxpayers are paying for what is the financial arrangement? Do you pay community colleges for this? How does community college that?
So, a good question. So most of our programs are actually funded by grants. So we actually partner with a workforce investment board or a community college to go after local, state, or federal grants for these programs.
For those of us who want the president, I'm assuming that your job, your metric is how to get exactly loans you get out of these programs. So my comment is, instead of president to president looking to interface with college, because obviously cold calling is.
Yeah, maybe you should just repeat it so everybody can hear.
Instead of president to president, okay, I assume, and that could be wrong, that your metric of how you're perceived as how well you're doing in your job is how many loans you get through the program. So I'm assuming business professors are looking to see how to interact with the company instead of cold calling that. Is it people with your job titles and that we would be looking for in companies with the socioeconomic, who are more socioeconomic on that side of the equation?
If I understand, what you're asking is where do you connect? Where does the college connect to an employer? And we're always encouraging both sides to have a single point of contact. I mean, if you're going to be a community college that does want to engage business, then having a business office, an office that does that outreach. The other side of it then is to start probably, and again, there's instructions in here on this, if you're going to a large corporation, you would start with your HR folks to see if that's the right engagement point. Smaller companies, it is going to be probably the president or at least the chief learning officer or someone like that. But you're right, cold calling doesn't help. I mean, it's recognizing what's going on in an industry and then seeing who your industry leaders are and starting with that. There's no point in going out and making an outreach to a sector that's not hiring. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would echo what Peg said. It's so important, and sometimes you find leaders in places that you otherwise wouldn't find. For large companies, you may actually reach out to field offices because the hiring supervisors and managers have a lot of clout when it comes to who they want to hire. And so through that channel, you may be able to sort of funnel them through HR and even higher up. The other piece is a lot of companies may not be thinking about building a longer-term workforce. And so to Peg's point, finding those industry leaders and latching on to those folks to try to get to the point where you can have the partnership. But I've seen a lot of success rates throughout different states. So, you know, between Peg and I'm sure if there's a particular state that you're currently wanting to work with, we can probably find an industry partner that would be interested.
One of the things I want to encourage, though, is that going back to looking at your economic stats, and very often a business association in the area, like your economic development folks or your chamber of commerce, might be the place to start if you don't want to do like what I call retail selling. You know, if you want to do some kind of wholesale, start with a business association, if in fact there is one, and see, and again, recognize what are your industries that have a demand. So I think back here. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any suggestions on how to get businesses and companies to recognize your keys, credentials, and understand what those mean? Did people hear me? Any suggestions on how to get businesses and companies to recognize work keys, credentials?
Good question, because I struggle with that myself, and the only way that you're going to help them understand it is to show them the value. And again, I go back to case studies that will say, for this company, if we did a pre-screening with work keys and identified those competencies that were not fully formed, and this is what we're trained to, and then your success rate, your time to productivity was one of the metrics out there, is much decreased, and you can put a dollar amount on that and show them this worked for this company, it will work for you. That's the kind of information that's in this report. And work keys is one of those things that's been very helpful in the, particularly manufacturing industry. I've worked with the NAM for about 6 years. So even where it has a lot of uptake, it still takes selling it. And the other thing to look at is ACT is very invested in making that happen as well. And I would engage them as a partner. They have lots of case studies to look at as well. So if you can, especially if you can align what industry you're going to with an industry case, businesses want to see where it works. It's like a peer-to-peer sharing. And if you share that as another peer, then in fact, you know, they'll respond to that more quickly.
To touch on that, if you're interested, you can contact me. I'm from South Carolina. We have a statewide Work-Ready Communities Initiative. It's been sponsored primarily through our South Carolina Chamber of Commerce and our governor's office. So I'm glad to send you some information on that. Thanks.
I wanted to say thank you. Nice job on the presentation. I have a question, maybe it's a clarifying question, because I'm curious, are you offering then certificates and degrees? Students are on a career pathway through this attainment process. So once they've gone through this training, are they awarded a certificate as recognized by the community college? We're all driven by completion, and I'm wondering how these two worlds merge given the current realities we're faced with.
Sure, yeah, and I think we get asked that at the same time, because right now, as Peg mentioned, we are sort of speaking different languages. So most of our programs are accredited. So for the Fresno College Power Pathway Bridge to Utility Worker program, it's 19 units. Same thing as American River College up in Sacramento. So that's our signature programs. Our affinity programs, the one that Colin's going to talk a bit more about, is a 2-year associate's program. It's a certificate that's recognized by PG&E. We're working on getting that recognized more through the industry as well. So I think that's where we need to partner is we get a recognized credential for the employer, but what does that do for the college? And so bridging those two things has been important.
Well, and part of the issue right now is how do we define completion? And you know, that's an issue that we're all dealing with, and sometimes a industry recognized credential is what somebody comes in for, and so how do we count that as a completion? And that's, you know, that's an ongoing question within your industry as well as ours. So let's take just a minute and let Con tell his story, because he's sitting up there being very anxious, I think, and let y'all hear from a student employee point of view, and we're happy to continue the discussion, okay?
First, I'd like to apologize. I don't have any gifts like Yanni do.
I'll bring you some next time. You're PG&E too, so you're covered.
Just a little bit something about myself. I was raised in Stockton. Parents came over here from from overseas. I've been here for 30 years. Went through a couple of community college, didn't know what I wanted to do. Got a job as a general manager. I worked as a general manager for a restaurant for 5 years. At that time, I met my wife overseas, and stuff happened, and then the housing market crashed. That's one of the worst, probably one of the worst experiences of my life. I lost my job. My daughter was just born, and I was out of a job for almost a year. So 2012, I was looking through PG&E's website, looking for careers, and saw Power Pathways, all the schools that they had. So I applied for college in San Mateo. At that time, I was working, just got another job. It's a full-time job, going to school, and I loved the school, but the work was barely paid the rent. So I went to school, worked, and then I got some great news that my wife and my daughter was approved to come to the U.S. And they came here on June of 2012. So thank you. We also got married that time when she came over. But at that time I was really worried. I wasn't working, I could barely pay rent. So I looked into PG&E's some other schools that they had going, and I looked up Cypress Mandela. It was a pre-apprentice boot camp program, 16 weeks non-paid. So going to school is full-time. Cypress Mandela was full-time, 40 hours a week, 5 days a week, and I was working 6 days at night too. So going to school, 40 hours a week, and working 40 hours a week, getting about 5-6 hours of sleep, and going through tons of Red Bulls and energy drinks and coffee. After that, after 16 weeks, I started up with San Mateo in the fall. So I had to I made a big sacrifice. Had to cut back on work. Only worked 2 days a week. So after this Cypress Mandela was another 6 weeks with PG&E non-paid too. The Bridge to Power Pathway, the gas utility. So I was going to that and going to San Mateo, College of San Mateo too, and working on the weekends. Barely saw my wife, barely saw my daughter, and in the end, when we went through the gas utility work, we went through all kinds of power tools, training, safety, and different aspects of how to be a great employee with PG&E. And I loved every minute of it. I wish I could go back and do it again. Once I got hired on, I got hired on with Gary Clark at the Hayward GC. Started working, doing the things that we did at the school, at the PG&E school. So when we started that, started working, started making some money again, I decided I needed to keep on going to school. Even though I love this job, pretty soon I'm going to get to that age where I can't hold a power tool up anymore. So I'm still going to College of San Mateo for the electrical tech program, and we do a lot of troubleshooting and maintenance and all of those things that PG&E would like to see us later on. That's my story. Are there any questions or how I did this? You can ask. No, just kidding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, I think that's the story of so many of our community college students. They're juggling both work and families and class and stuff. And I think that anytime that we can more closely align employers with education, we help create a bridge that suits that a little bit. I mean, even if it's tapping our employers to offer some flexibility, and then sharing back with some, block scheduling of classes, so we figure out what works for both of us, or some kind of a blended learning, process that serves both. Again, the student to completion, the employer to getting a well skilled employee. So, questions?
How did you maintain kind of the long-term vision on a day-to-day basis, working 5 days a week, 7 days a week, all the time?
Motivation. Every day, every morning that I wake up, I think about my future and my daughter. Right at that moment, I had nothing, and I just thought about the future and what I can do to, look back on it and tell my daughter, like, this is what I did for you.
Kids are role motivators, aren't they?
So my understanding is that you don't have to pay tuition. Is that correct? It's funded through grants?
So for Power Pathways programs, they're all free. But when Kong just mentioned it's non-paid, we are working to see if there's a way we can provide a stipend or some sort of scholarship. But right now the training is completely free, but they don't receive a stipend.
In advance or reimbursement?
So there's two things we're talking about. So there's the Power Pathway program, and then there's ongoing education, which would be reimbursement.
That's a good question, though. We have learned with our research that tuition assistance, regardless of how it's offered, is always better if it's prepaid, and where employers can create situations where they pay schools directly and don't have to rely on the student to pay and reimburse them. That's often just the ability to prepay that for the student employee is a barrier.
Are there any plans to sort of merge this with a formalized apprenticeship program?
So that's an interesting question because Power Pathway actually funnels people into our apprenticeship programs. But one thing that we have been talking about with some of our colleges is what are some opportunities to actually offer courses that are taught in our current apprenticeship programs. So for example, to go through your first step of an apprenticeship, you might need 5 classes. I'm just making that up. Can we offer 3 of those 5 classes at a community college so that they're actually 3 classes ahead when they get into our apprenticeship, when they get into PG&E? So those are some things that we're talking about right now to see if we can do what you just mentioned.
I'm a little confused on the relationship between community college, your organization, and the Workforce Development Board, and who talks to who to get things set up, and who really controls all of it, and how does that work?
On a large level, this is a very typical sector project, sector-based workforce development, where you're working with your workforce folks because they, in fact, especially if you're dealing with the hard to serve population and that underskilled, they're the ones that you go to first to screen and pull them in. So when you have a workforce, then an education provider and the industry together, those creates some very stable sector projects that have been going on for probably around 8 years now in the country. And this is kind of a good example of that. So who specifically do you talk to? Is that go?
Yeah, so it's different depending on the program. So for one program, it could be the community college who partners with the Workforce Investment Board and says, hey, PG&E, we've done this before, let's do it again. There's that, or there's PG&E that says, you know what, that's a great college partner that we want to work with. Let's see if you can go for a grant. If you can't go for a grant, I look at my budget and see if there's an operational budget that can fund that program. So it depends on the program, but what's been so important for us is to find a partner, both on the workforce side and the community college side, that has the same vision, that wants to basically achieve the same thing. We've had partners in the past, trust me, it was pulling teeth and lots of late night calls because we just weren't aligned. And so, well, that just shows that we probably don't want to partner again because we just aren't sort of on the same page. So sometimes it takes, a couple times to try it out to see if a program will work. And if it doesn't, we'll just let it go. But so far, 90% of the programs that we've done and the partners we've worked with has continued to be a success.
And we have a lot of employers who serve on workforce boards. I mean, do y'all work, does anybody work with your workforce boards or your WIBs and one-stops and folks like that? Okay, so you know that they're required to have, right now, over 50% of their board has to be employer-driven. And in fact, Yanni's predecessor worked on the workforce board, was one of the board that she served on and understood that system, as well as PG&E working with community colleges. It was kind of a catalyst, I think, in bringing some of that together. Business driven. And we've talked about, again, I heard the training. This is a utility worker. PG&E and a lot of our companies they're looking for engineers, scientists. I mean, it runs the full gamut. This is one project that we brought to showcase here, but it runs, everywhere from that entry level up to, again, engineers, scientists, folks like that.
If I heard the numbers right, even if I did win this one, the screening, which almost anyone could start, was 1,000, and then it worked itself down to a cohort of 20, and 14 were eventually hired. That's the 70%. Is that the correct?
I guess when you think about the industry, yes. So PG&E cares about, I don't want to say we don't care about people getting hired in other places, but as an employer, PG&E in the industry, we're tracking, and what's on my scorecard is who gets into our industry. So the folks will get hired, but if they go into wine and Napa and other retail, we don't track those metrics. So those folks will eventually get hired, but 70% right now comes into our industry.
But from the start to the finish,
Right. If you started with 1,000 cohort who was going through the screening,
yes.
and it was went down quickly from that, and that's a real indicator of the people who don't have math skills. They just don't hit the grade on whatever your assessment is to go into that.
So we use work keys as sort of the last assessment before the interview, and about 100 people go through the work key screening. And we found that if you score at a silver level or above, which is a 4, you have a very high probability after going through our 240 hours of the bridge course to actually pass our pre-employment test. So that's what we use as our screening tool to actually get folks in the cohort.
But that is an indicator of the reading levels that the people that fall out. And those people, in fact, are then referred back to their workforce folks for training for some of those basic skills that they don't come with.
Thanks. A question on corporate voices on your website. You look at what you got there, and it looks like you do work nationally, so this is not just a California issue. Okay, great. And then in terms of some of the work that you found that's ongoing in the States that's broader than workforce boards, say businesses and higher ed community groups getting together. The reason I raise that issue is that there are a number of groups around the country that do that kind of work. And from West Michigan, we have a group that involves 13 community colleges, or 13 presidents of colleges and universities, plus the 60 largest businesses in a 1.2 million population region. We sit down once a quarter and ask each other It's pretty simple. If you ask what you need, there are responses. And I think that your research is just dead on. And this is exactly the kind of thing that's been successful for us over the last 3 years. So thanks for doing what you do.
We learn from you. I mean, the intent is to learn what works on the ground, to take it up to a national level, and then make this information available to anybody that's willing to take it up and do the hard work that you guys are doing on the ground there. So thanks for doing that. Actually, worked with a business group in Kalamazoo over to that area. So yeah, so in manufacturing. Yes, ma'am. Anybody else?
I may be using up my dance card here, but my question was around the use of prior learning assessment. You mentioned that you were doing that. I'm just maybe a comment again about how Kong may be using that and the validation at San Mateo for that, so you can, I'm all about acceleration, as I know most of us are here. How are you able to partner with PG&E, using that experience to get the credit you need to advance in your program? Has that been made available to you? Is PG&E able to work with your college to drive that home a little bit more? I just wondered, because that's certainly something we are seeing an increase. I'm again from West Michigan as well, as what is, we are seeing an increased need for that, the documentation of that, and the operatization of that.
Thank you. So,
we do have a PG&E rep at our school. She comes in, she promotes our school, our classes, and helps us with the ETT test that we have, and watch what we're doing and see how we progress in the program. There's always someone there.
Do you want to talk about the ACE thing?
I mean, just to build on what Kong just said first, PG&E for all of our apprenticeships, as well as our entry-level skilled craft positions, have pre-employment tests, and that's sort of the entryway into a potential role into PG&E. And so the credential, what we're trying to bridge right now is what the credential means and how that prepares you to pass that pre-employment test. But to Peg's point about the work with ACE, what we're trying to do is actually get our apprenticeships to actually have college credits. So meaning working backwards to try to get them credit, or even forwards for those that are just starting, to actually get credit for training that they're doing at PG&E. And that's huge. It's something that hasn't really been done before. And so that's certainly an initiative to drive it.
So that's a question I have for y'all. We're doing some research right now around what employers are doing to create transfer pathways for their employees. And ACE credit recommendations is one of them. As a matter of fact, we thought that was the main one. And as we went to that, we're getting some pushback, frankly. I want to talk to you about your experience, that it's just so arduous and that it's a difficult step for them. And the turnaround is that not all colleges accept it. Is that true? And I've heard that California doesn't accept ACE accreditation recommendations.
That is true, but those of us that are CAC grantees, especially round 2, and I see South Carolina in particular, we're going to be working on a statewide initiative across the technical colleges to have common regulations, standards, and we're going to we're going to get over some of the pushback on the competency testing.
So what we're finding is that employers are very often going directly to an education provider, having their internal training, education assessed for credit recommendations, particularly when they're working directly with them on a credential or a degree of some kind. And so if in fact you are in Starbucks and you have gained the position of a store manager, and they have a very codified training program, then what happens is they get credit for up to 6 hours, maybe in a business, toward a business degree, something like that. So, yes, so we're finding that my word for it is balkanized. It's just, and because there is a marketplace that's being developed out there for that, right now it's kind of lawlessness, and I'm trying to put some stakes around this and figure out who's doing what in this. And when associations of employers can go and get that kind of overall credit recommendation, it kind of paves the way for everybody else. But it's still in early stages, so everybody's kind of clamoring. I think one of the things that we're learning with the hard-to-serve populations, those people who are lower-skilled folks, they are not going through a PLA process like the, go online, write your portfolio, and do all that. They just aren't going to do it. And so we don't find that to be a successful route for that. But we're trying to leverage what employers can do to, in fact, help education recognize that learning happens and that these people should get some kind of prior learning assessment given to them. Yes, ma'am. Sorry. Is it TMI?
Yeah, no, very long voice. Thank you. I was very impressed with your willingness to share your pre-employment tests. It hasn't been my experience that companies are willing to do that. So I wanted to ask on a national level. I always thought it was so helpful for community colleges to know what kind of pre-employment tests different companies give and to be able to help students prepare for those. But some companies don't really want that type of tutoring. So on a national level, is this a common opportunity that companies are willing to share their pre-employment testing?
The more that we can create cohorts of employers and they all come together and agree on something and they can do it anonymously, that's where it's happening more. A lot of the large companies that we work with, and they are national and international employers, you're absolutely right. It's proprietary information and they don't necessarily want to divulge that. But if they can do it in a way that they're doing it jointly, and so this association of employers, this is what's going to get you in the door, they'll do it that way. The key to it is creating a kind of an intermediary that can bring them all together and create a safe place where they can all talk about that kind of thing. And again, that goes back to the relationship building, FaceTime, trust building, that kind of thing. It takes time. But they're becoming more forthcoming about it. The thing is that Yanni's talking about is that when you throw out a work keys credential and say, okay, we need everybody to be reading at 4 and locating information at 2, and that's pretty easy to say because it's already a validated and defensible reading. Sometimes, they're not going to put that out there because of all the legal pushback.
We work with a car company, 2 car companies. We work with 2 car companies in Ohio, and I peeked at their tests, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're incredible. I mean, they have all these, I can't even explain, I can't even describe the tests. And there would be no way, we're not allowed to really help students with it, but I guess it's a predictor of success. But I just thought it would be so, powerful if community colleges could have more access to some examples of types of pre-employment assessments. I understand the personality ones you don't want to share, but the ones that are cognitive.
Right, absolutely. And we found that to be very helpful in terms of the placement rate, which for us is the most important, is to identify folks who have an aptitude through some sort of training that we can provide them to then be able to move them into careers within our company.
Questions? Did you get what you came for? Okay, good. Let me just, one last couple of things. Business and Community College Partnership Blueprint. It's on our website. Here are hard copies of it. This is the talent development solution. Frankly, this is written to the business community. This is corporate voices trying to say to businesses, this is why you should engage with your higher ed providers. And a lot of them are community college centric. And there are case studies in here. You will learn a little bit about how to approach different sector business folks using that. The big ones have all the case studies in the back of them. And then there's an overview, just the executive summary that gives you some of the outtake information on what you can expect from an employer and then what are the drivers that bring them to that kind of relationship. So go in there and talk to them from a value proposition. This is what we bring to you. This is why you should partner with us and go in there with the knowledge that you bring a real service to them. Anything you want to say?
I was just going to say thank you for sticking it out. It is late in the afternoon, so hopefully you were able to take away some pieces of information that you might be able to bring back to your institutions.